Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video I'm going to take a look at a slightly older, almost a classic card, I would say, in my opinion. This is the AMD Radeon RX6800, and this particular model is the MSI Radeon RX6800 Gaming X Trio, or Gaming Trio X, or whatever. Basically, it's the triple fan version with the RGB goodies. This card is a fantastic card. Now, I actually had the 6900 XT, which I loved. That was a great card, but it had a few issues with it, so unfortunately that went back. And back in the time when this came out, if some of you will remember, as far back as 2020, around about October, November of 2020 is when the RX6800 was actually announced and launched to the public, and those were funny times if you remember that far back. There were various things going on in the world which meant that supply chains were basically ruined. And also at that time we had the launches from Ampere with the RTX3070, and also we had things like the 3080, 3090. So this was a time when AMD actually came to the market and actually did stick it to Nvidia, which is not really where they're at the moment. So in hindsight, this was, I think personally, some of the golden era of AMD graphics cards. Recently, I've been purchasing many of the used cards on the 6000 series, 6600s, 6700s, 6750 XTs, and now I'm glad to get my hands on a 6800. Now this one actually I got from eBay, and actually it come up as a bargain on our eBay discount bot on our Discord, and I managed to get this for a spectacular price, or at least I think it was, of £222 exactly. Now it was actually up for £260, but they were open to offers. So I offered £222, and a little bit later on the offer was accepted. So for £222, I am very, very pleased with this. Now if you're watching this around about July, August of 2025, and you're thinking, I've seen these on sale, how much should I be paying? It's actually quite a tricky one, because at the moment, I would say £250 for a premium model is about the most I would pay personally. There is a lot of competition on the market at the moment, especially around the £250 mark. You've of course got the Intel Arc B580, which we've reviewed previously, which you're more than welcome to check out. Although obviously with the Intel cards, potentially driver issues and other things, and also that's only got 12 gigs of RAM, whereas the 6800 was one of the first cards from AMD of this kind of price point where you had 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which does actually give it a little bit more longevity and a little bit longer legs over the 8 gig cards which were available, such as the RTX 3070. This generally is faster than the 3070, and it kind of nestles somewhere in between the 3070 Ti, the 3080, and just underneath it you've got things like the 3070 8 gig. The Ti is slightly faster, but obviously the 3070 is a little bit slower. And also, obviously, in the same kind of family, you've got the 6750 XTs, which are a little bit lower down the stack. Obviously, this is the next one up. And if you're looking at modern day cards, so if you're looking at purely on performance in rasterization games, then something like the 9060 XT 16 gig, which retails for somewhere around about the £300–330 mark here in the UK, brand new. Really, this is about £70 cheaper, give or take. So if you want to maybe have a little bit of a punt on the market, see if you can pick up a bargain, certainly potentially you might enjoy this. I actually really like these cards, especially this MSI one. The Gaming X range, the trios, I really do like them with the triple fans and a little bit of RGB on there. I just think they were some of the best cards that AMD made. It's a very big shame, I think personally, that MSI are no longer making AMD graphics cards, because imagine what we could have had. But anyway, I'm digressing. So that is a brief introduction, how much I paid for it, etc., and other cards around about the same sort of pricing. But what is more important is actually how well does it do in today's computer market. Now, some of the games that I've been playing on my PC, there's a mixture of some old classics and also some slightly more modern titles. I will say I'm not a huge gamer, so I spend most of my time researching or playing older games or just video editing and making videos, so I don't get the time for all the latest and greatest games. So do take my results with a slight pinch of salt. And also in today's video, we have been testing at 1440p as a minimum, and there is some 4K footage in there as well. And all the tests are based either at high settings, ultra or epic, depending on what made sense for us in terms of frame rate. I've tried to aim for a frame rate of at least 100 FPS, so that'll give you some idea of what this potentially can do for you. Now, before we actually get into the games, I'm not going to go in deep into any of the specs because this has been out 4 or 5 years now. So if you want to find out the specs, you certainly can do. Essentially, it's a 16 gig card. That is pretty much what you need to know. It's PCI Express Gen 4 x 16, and the rest of the specs you can find out for yourself. So I'll put some links actually to Hardware Unboxed. They've done some great footage when this first came out, and also some follow-up videos as well, so you can see how it's progressed with that AMD fine wine technology. Anyway, with all that said, let's head over to the computer and take a closer look. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at some synthetic benchmarks. So first of all, we've got Solar Bay from 3D Mark, and with this one, we are scoring 3,146 points, I think it is, when we get to the end there. So yeah, not too bad at all. Seems very smooth. Obviously, due to the fact this doesn't have ray tracing, or at least not the strongest of ray tracing, this does struggle very slightly, but still not too bad at all. And next up, we've got the 3D Mark Time Spy. So with Time Spy, we've got a Time Spy score of 16,560 points, and that breaks down to a graphics score of 16,702 points and a CPU score of 15,800 points. Now, I should say in this testing, we are using an Intel Core 200 series processor, the 245K, running at the Intel specs, but with the core enhancements enabled. So it's not a particularly high-end processor, so potentially if you're thinking of getting one of these GPUs and pairing it with a slightly older CPU from AM4 or from Intel, you should be absolutely fine. Okay, so here we have CS2, I think what it is then. So yeah, this is CS2, and with this we're running at 4K, and we've got it set to the high preset. And at the moment we're getting sort of frame rate is kind of all over the place, anywhere between sort of 150 and 200 FPS in some of the areas here. So I actually died, so we're just kind of watching what is going on here. But yeah, it seems to be pretty playable. I guess most people, if you're trying to be competitive, you probably wouldn't be playing at 4K. But just trying to show you here that the RX6800 16 gig can actually stretch its legs a little bit, even with modern titles. Now, I know this is an older game, but it is a new revamped engine. And as you can see here, it all looks very nice, and we do get anywhere between sort of 150-ish up to kind of 200 plus, depending where you are in the map. And temperature-wise, not doing too bad at all. We're in about 65 Celsius, I think it is. And you'll notice actually the memory clock and also the GPU clock. And the GPU clock on this particular card is supposed to be around about 2100, but we're quite often boosting a little bit higher than that, so up to kind of 2200, which is kind of good. And also the efficiency of this card is actually pretty good as well. So we're looking at around about 160, 170 watts. Now, I did wonder to see if this was actually kind of being throttled in some way, shape or form, but it does seem to show the GPU at 99%, so it is kind of flat out. And just wanted to stay still here just to see what was going on. And yeah, it doesn't seem to change much, around about 160 watts. So for a 4 or 5 year old card, it's actually not doing too bad at all. And the game itself looks great. High settings, 4K, you can't really go too far wrong. Okay, so next we've got the Cyberpunk built-in benchmark. Now this is now set to high settings, the high preset, and also is in 1440p. 4K might be pushing it a little bit because we wanted to get that sort of 100 FPS, and we are kind of hovering around that. So if you look at the counter there, we are in DirectX 12 mode. We're at about 100 to 120 FPS whilst we're moving around. Pretty stable actually, and again, we're at about 60 degrees Celsius on the GPU. It does seem there's some form of slight throttling going on here because we are only using 96% of our GPU. Although clock speeds are still pretty good, and the wattage has gone up very slightly to around about 170 watts. And this looks absolutely fine, there's no stutters, and if you look at the frame time graph at the bottom there, it's basically flat. So that is what we want to see. No stutters or spikes, even at high settings, 1440p on what is just over a £200 graphics card. Absolutely fantastic. And if we look at the end results there, so we've got an average FPS of 116 FPS, which I think is pretty decent. Again, you can see the preset is set to high, texture quality is high, and we're at 1440p full screen. and how that translates to the real world. So yeah, we're basically kind of getting what it said on the tin. So here we are in the open world, and we're getting around about 110 to around about 120 FPS thereabouts. Again, extremely consistent frame times. And although I'm not really moving around a lot, and we are in a relatively open area, and at the moment half of the screen is blacked out, but still doing very well indeed. Still using around about 170 watts of power. Still seems to have the GPU kind of stuck at around 96 to 97% of its full capacity. We'd like to see that go to 99 really, but still, again, around about 65 degrees Celsius. The cooler on this card is fantastic, does a really good job. And as you see, CPU is doing pretty well, using about 50% CPU. RAM usage there, you can see for the actual game, is just underneath 8 gigabytes, so you're getting kind of close to that limit on some other cards, which may be limited with VRAM, so having the extra on board on this is very helpful. And next up, we've got some RoboCop action. So this is RoboCop Rogue City. This is going into one of the areas where there's a lot of darkness, but a lot of lighting as well. So we've got some neon lighting, lots of shadows. Now again, this is 1440p, and it's also in the high preset, and it still looks very nice. The textures are great. If you look at the wall where they've actually got the spray painting, yeah, you can see some really nice textures in there. So it is very texture heavy, and you can see some of the lighting effects there as you kind of turn around, which would be effectively reflecting on your visor. So yeah, looks really good. I do apologize for some of the jaggies on here whilst recording. For some reason the capture card just wasn't happy. Again, with this, we've tried to get somewhere around the 100 FPS, and we seem to be there pretty consistently, and the frame times are still excellent. And even going into these heavily lit areas where there's a lot of lighting technology going on, it still looks fantastic. And old Robo there does look great in his original uniform, so to speak, not from the new 2022 or 2023 release, which looked awful. This, yeah, this is a great game, and again, the textures and lighting are excellent. We do dip a little bit sometimes down to like 80s, as we're seeing here, when there's additional lighting effects going on. But overall, I think it looks great, and if RoboCop's your thing, then you're going to be very pleased you've got yourself a nice cheap RX6800. And now going outside, so there's a little bit more going on here, and obviously a lot more textures. And we've got some fast movers, so I thought that would be appropriate to see how well it does with faster moving items on screen. So again, we're still in pretty much the same position, around about 100 FPS, just dipping slightly under here in the 90s. But yes, it's doing very well, and also you can see the memory usage. So if you're thinking about playing this at 1440p, you are going to want more than 8 gigabytes on your card, because we're currently using 8.5 gigabytes. So if you were using an 8 gig card like the RTX3070, then this would start struggling in buffering, or you'd have to reduce the settings a little bit to make it actually playable. But as you can see again, the frame time graph at the bottom there is basically, yeah, very stable indeed. A little bit of a spike there when there's explosions on the screen. I think that's pretty understandable. There's lots of action going on, and it does perform very, very well. Very pleased. And again, this is a great game with lots of lighting effects. And next up, something a lot easier to run. This is Rocket League. Now, this is running Rocket League in Steam. And again, this is 1440p. This is with everything maxed out as much as possible. I don't even think I've turned off motion blur. Maybe I did. I can't honestly remember. Not that it makes a great deal of difference. But yeah, this runs fantastically. If you want to play Rocket League and you want to play somewhat competitively, your gameplay may be better than mine. Yeah, this is going to be great. You're going to get 400 frames per second pretty easily, regardless of what you're doing. So yeah, this is going to run really well indeed. Obviously we're losing here, so that's not a great example of it. And in terms of wattage, using around about 160 watts again, we are around about the same sort of level, so 94 to 96% GPU usage. But again, these kind of frame rates, it doesn't really matter. You could expect it to do less. You can actually cap it if you wanted to save some energy or lower the wattage. But this game, yeah, looks great. It's doing a fantastic job. You can't complain. It, yeah, just looks great. And you could do 4K on this very easily indeed, should you wish to. But yeah, Rocket League, obviously, goes without saying, it's going to be very easy to run. So next up, we've got some Wreckfest action. As a lot of you will know, Wreckfest is one of my favourite titles. This is one of those games which runs pretty well on anything. but as you turn up the textures and stuff, it can get a little bit more demanding. But again, this is 1440p. This is set to ultra settings, so the all the eye candy is on, and it does look really good. Again, this is doing fantastically well, so anywhere between sort of 150 to 250 FPS depending where you are. This is also one of those games where, depending where you are actually on the circuit or map, things can look completely different and frame rates can go all over the place. But if you do look at our frame time graph at the bottom, it is again almost pretty much a flat line. There's no spikes there, very low milliseconds there, and it's running pretty much 99% of our GPU, which is always nice to see. And the actual megahertz is kind of all over the place depending what is going on. So yeah, you can see it does boost up to just under 2200 megahertz. This one's actually using a little bit more of our power budget, so we're up to around about 180 watts here in places, just slightly over. So yeah, this is not quite punishing the card, but it's certainly getting towards being at that level. Weirdly, this graphics card has a TDP, or total graphics power, of 250 watts. I don't think I've seen a game yet hit over 200 on it, so I'm not too sure why that is, whether it's something to do with my configuration, whether the CPU isn't drawing enough frames from it. I honestly don't know, but for me personally, if I had a 250 watt GPU and it was running really well at 170 watts, I'd be pretty happy. And again, I am pretty happy. This is running great and it's very playable, very responsive, so especially with driving games, you do want that competitive edge and you do want your inputs to be accurately reflected in what is going on the screen, and it certainly adds on here, and I managed to finish first position, so yeah, you can't go too far wrong. And again, the lighting and all the smoke effects, tyres, etc. It's just very good looking game. So that's great, but let's take a look at its sibling with Wreckfest 2. So Wreckfest 2, yeah, somewhat of an oddball. Now, for some reason, I can't understand why it is, but this seems to be locked at 60 FPS. Now, I have gone in, I've turned off VSync and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure whether there's a bug in this particular release. It is still very much in beta, so yeah, your mileage may vary. This again is in the high preset, so there's a lot more stuff going on here. If you look at the actual terrain, you can see the detail and all the physics effects in the tires, etc. when you hit them. There is a lot going on here, but even so, potentially we have got room for 100 FPS. We're limited at the moment. GPU is around about sort of 80 to 90% utilization. So yeah, I think there is a little bit more in the tank for this. Hopefully, as this game comes up to its final retail release at some point in the near future, we'll be able to test this properly. But certainly in the meantime, if you are having a little bit of fun with Wreckfest 2 and you want to use an RX6800 because they're pretty cheap on the market, then yeah, I think you're going to be absolutely fine. It seems to run absolutely great. And next up, we've got some Fortnite action. Now, Fortnite's one of those games again, so there's so many settings you can change in here to make the game run faster or make it look nicer. Being that it's based on the Unreal Engine, there's a lot of opportunities to make it look really nice and kind of do basically, yeah, really whatever you want to do. But this is running 1440p. We're also at the high preset. I haven't changed anything else, just left it on high. And with this, we're getting around about 110, maybe 150 FPS in some places, depending where you actually are. You've got some faster moving stuff going on at some points, but still doesn't seem to be dropping much. The frame timing graph again is very nice and low, very stable. Again, we're using around about sort of in the 90% of your GPU power, around about 170 watts. Seems to be running absolutely fine. Very enjoyable experience actually. I normally use an Nvidia card on my day-to-day PCs and for video editing and also for my stream PC. So it's actually nice to get an AMD card and get a feel for what the drivers are like. I know there's a lot of people actually complaining about the modern AMD drivers, especially on some older cards, and there's been problems with things like the 9070, certain amounts of stuttering, but I've actually found this to be really good. No problems at all, and yeah, the game seems to be running kind of flawlessly. And I was surprised it did as well as it did, considering this is a relatively inexpensive card. In its day, it retailed for around about just under £600, I think it was. Around about 570 was the MSRP, but because it was in 2020, you couldn't buy anything at MSRP if you could buy anything at all because of what was going on in the world. So we had to make do with what we could get. But now, 4 years later, this you can pick up for basically kind of like a third of the price almost. And yeah, it runs really good. And even with Fortnite, with all the eye candy pretty much turned on, still looks great, and we're still getting over 100 FPS at 1440p, which I think is great. And last up for today, we've got another one of my favourites, Dead Island 2. So again, this is running 1440p with the high preset. Now with this one, there is some frame scaling going on, so we are using FSR2 in the quality preset, and also we've got the FX variable shaders running as well. Those are turned on. Now with this, I wanted to aim for around about 150, and we seem to be not too far off it. In some instances, we're getting towards 200 FPS. Sometimes it dips down as low as about 100, 110, so we're still clearing that 100 FPS, which is what I like to see. And again, for this type of game, there's lots of things going on in various places depending where you are and whereabouts in the map you are. If you're in a train carriage, for instance, there's not many textures in it. It's going to be easy to do. If you're in a wider or more open area, such as this, where there's a lot of things going on, a lot of characters, then it's harder to run. But generally, we're around about the sort of 170 to 180 FPS here, and we're using pretty much most of our GPU, around about 160 watts, which again is fantastic really for what it is. These cards were known as being pretty efficient at the time. Obviously things after they've got better have become more efficient, at least in some respects, but this I still feel is the kind of like the cream of the crop. 2020, those releases, the Radeon RX 6000 series, some of them weren't great when they first came out, like the 6600, maybe the 6700, but the 6800 and higher, yeah, absolutely great graphics cards, and they've aged well, and also they've come down in price considerably. So if you are looking to play some of your favorite titles at 1440p at over 100 FPS in general, then I think the RX6800 16GB is going to be well worth a look. And as you can see, it does look very nice. I do like it when all the other candies turn on. Anyway, I think that'll pretty much do for taking a look at the games. Let's wrap this up. So there you go, we've had a look at some games, and if you haven't guessed already, I'm pretty in favour of getting one of these if you can pick them up for the right price. Now, I would say, obviously, again, going over what we said earlier on, if you can get this around about £250 or less, I would say snap it up. It's a great deal. Depending on the condition and on the type of card, obviously premium cards like this Gaming X Trio is probably worth spending a little bit more. And if you want to tie in with the rest of your system with the RGB strip, which is on the side, then it's also a nice addition. But if you want to go for some of the kind of less fancy models or the more basic ones, such as the SFX models, those are always a good shout, but just do make sure you pay a little bit less. Or potentially, if you want to spend a little bit more, something like the RX 9060 XT 16GB is shaping up to be one of the best value cards that AMD has put out for a significant while, at least since this type of period anyway. So the RX 9060 XT 16GB is a little bit faster than this, but it is a little bit more expensive. It's obviously modern. And also, if you're looking at playing games and you do wish to enable things like ray tracing, and you want to take advantage of FSR4, then potentially you might want to do that, because unfortunately the older RDNA 2 cards don't support it, or potentially they could, but they probably won't. Maybe they might add it at a later date. I think you can force it, but officially they don't really support it. But I think really for around about £200 to £250, depending where you're shopping, I think the RX 6800 is definitely well worth a shout. And if you've had one of these, or you've owned a similar card, please let us know in that comment section below. And is it still in use? Do you still love it to bits? Or did you sell it on and make a profit during the COVID era? Anyway, I think that's about it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, smash the like button. If you want to see more content like this on a daily basis, maybe consider hitting subscribe, and don't forget to hit the chime notification. That way you'll be notified of future video releases. But for now, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.